an amazing UNH alum who I will introduce momentarily. Co-hosting with me today is also my colleague, Alexis Dwyer. She is Alumni and Network Stewardship Coordinator at the UNH Sustainability Institute. And you'll hear more from Alexis towards the end of today's webinar. We're so pleased to partner with UNH Alumni Relations to bring this year-long Alumni Sustainability webinar series to our community, because we know that we have hundreds of alumni from across the decades who are working in sustainability-related fields and who have deep expertise and really valuable perspectives on these topics. But we also know there are thousands more alumni who don't work in the field of sustainability, but who are interested in the topic. So we've really designed these webinars to allow you to hear from UNH alumni who are leading experts in sustainability across industries and across sectors. And today, as in each webinar, we will, our guests will share diverse perspectives on the key trends, and you'll hopefully gain practical knowledge that you can use both professionally and personally. Today's topic is a big one: waste. Why does this matter? Why should we all care? Gary Hirschberg, who is the co-founder of sustainable food leader Stonyfield Organic, once said, "We have to realize that we're part of nature. We are not above it." And he also said, "We're not exempt from nature's rules." Waste is a uniquely human invention. I think he may have also used the word human arrogance. He really explained that we built our modern society on the back of several myths. For example, one of the myths he talks about is that the waste from our system, our human systems, our species, can be allowed to pollute or contaminate. That's really an absurd myth in his mind. Also, the idea that the earth is infinitely resilient to handle these kinds of insults that come from this huge quantity of waste that we have is also a myth. And lastly, this idea that there's somehow a place called away where we can send our waste is also is the third of his myths. And of course, in natural systems, there's no such thing as waste. The byproducts in one arena becomes food or raw materials in another. The leaves falling from the trees each autumn, for example, become nutrients returned to the soil. But in human systems and organizations like UNH, business as usual generates significant amounts of waste every year, negatively impacting human health, ecosystems, and an organization's bottom line as well. Before we dive in and hear from today's speaker, I'll just share a few highlights about how UNH is approaching the topic of waste here on our campus. We're really lucky. We have champions and colleagues across UNH who are working hard to address this challenge by avoiding creation of waste in the first place, and then also really creating a reuse culture. UNH utilizes systems in place such as the UNH Surplus program, which rehomes items on campus. UNH policy requires UNH departments to list items that they no longer want on the Surplus website and to consult before buying new to see if there are similar items available. For example, our Diamond Library, the wonderful faculty and staff over at Diamond Library, won a 2022 Sustainability Award for their collaborative furniture repurposing project, which allowed them to refurbish hundreds of pieces of furniture and keep those out of the landfill, and of course also saving the university money as well. UNH Housing donates hundreds of pounds of furniture and mattresses every year to the Institutional Reuse Network. And the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences here at UNH recycles tons of concrete each year used in research. UNH Dining has a reusable to-go container, and its decades-old composting program utilizes all of the post-consumer food waste from the dining halls to fertilize our fields here at the university. And last, in 2022, our Human Resources Department piloted a tiny trash program. Their staff received these small black bins for quote-unquote landfill items. These hang on the recycling bins. And so the tiny bin doesn't use plastic trash bags, and they're emptied into a central container. So the idea of this small size really emphasizing, minimizing, and encouraging the minimization of waste going to the landfill. One of our oldest reuse programs here at UNH is called Trash to Treasure, or known affectionately as T2T. It was founded by the passion and creativity of UNH students, led by Alex Freed, a 2013 graduate. Over 10 years later, Trash to Treasure is still going strong. Every spring, a student team collects tons of donated items from student housing during move out in the spring, and cleans and sorts them over the summer, and then hosts a massive fall move-in sale. It saves thousands of pounds of waste from the landfill and provides students with affordable goods. And while Trash to Treasure is student powered, it's also a massive undertaking that relies also on critical staff and faculty and volunteer labor as well. We do a lot at UNH around sustainability and including around waste, but I think it's really important just to note we're far from perfect. We have a long way to go to create systems and a culture of zero waste here at UNH. Like all universities and large organizations of all kinds, it really is one of our biggest sustainability challenges that we yet really have to crack. I'm excited to share we're partnering with the Post Landfill Action Network, known as PLAN, which was founded by the same alumnus, Alex Freed, who started Trash to Treasure all those years ago. It's now a national nonprofit that cultivates and supports student leaders and campuses in creating a world without waste. Our partnership with PLAN is using their Atlas methodology and is working to create a zero waste vision and roadmap for UNH. I think importantly, the Atlas framework really understands that waste is a complex and dynamic system, and that achieving zero waste will really require a whole university systems approach. Easier said than done, but we really look forward to sharing more with you soon. I think one of the things that's really exciting that is embedded in the vision that we're creating is the idea that waste is not just a logistical problem to solve, but also an incredible opportunity for teaching and learning and research by faculty, staff, and students. So more on this soon. Before I introduce today's speaker, I also wanted to note that we'll have plenty of time for questions from the audience towards the end of today's webinar. So we encourage you to put those questions in the Zoom webinar Q&A function at any time to get your questions in the queue. So to talk about today's webinar topic, waste, I'm really pleased to introduce Mikey Pasciuto. He's class of 2021 and now the co-founder of a company called Scrapp. Mikey holds a BS in mechanical engineering, but also a dual degree in sustainability and a minor in sustainable energy. During his time at UNH, Mikey achieved notable recognition, placing as a winner in the UNH Holloway competition, the UNH Social Venture Innovation Challenge, and various international competitions with their early ideas for the company that now has become Scrapp. In the summer of 2021, he was a UNH Sustainability Fellow working with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility, where he developed their Climate Action Challenge that is still in use today. And he's also since mentored 2 summer sustainability fellows, hosting now UNH students at his company Scrapp, and he'll be having a 3rd fellow again this summer. Mike is such a great role model for what we refer to here at UNH as change makers, and he has proven to be a loyal and engaged alum. So Mikey, thank you for all that you do for UNH as an alum, all the contributions you are making in the world. And I'll turn it over to you for a few minutes just to share a little bit more about yourself and your UNH connection.
Yeah, boy, kind of hard to go off that. You kind of covered it all, but thank you so much, Fiona. Great to meet everybody today. Um, Big thing about this session, I just always like to address first before introducing myself is I'm here to serve. So if people have questions, like please put them in the chat. No question is an unfair question, even if they're hard. So ask any and all questions because recycling gets a lot of flack, as it should in some regards. So seriously, any questions are welcome. I was born and raised Massachusetts. I grew up around manufacturing and machining. In a past life, I actually used to make aerospace components and medical components, specifically for the mechanical heart. So I went from a very high precision environment all of a sudden to going to trash and recycling. And back in 2018, you go to a local transfer station or you'd go to a recycling facility and they just say, "Yeah, just throw it over there. That's fine." And going from having to hold 5/10ths of an inch, so 0.005 of an inch, to "Yeah, over there is fine. We'll sort it and figure it out. Don't worry about it," was very jarring for me. And that's why I chose to get a career in solid waste and recycling, is because we're in the middle of that standardization right now. Um, a little bit about me personally. I am the co-founder of Scrap. My main responsibilities are around data analytics, sustainability, helping companies migrate to zero waste, and I do write some content for our blog as well. And then I have two dogs and a cat. About 250 pounds of dog running around my house at the moment. So if you hear barking or scratching at the door, that is that. Um, and my cat might wake up and join us on this call. So that's pretty much it about me. More than happy today, really, just to answer y'all's questions and talk more about solid waste and recycling in general.
It's awesome, Mikey. We're so pleased to have you today, and we've got a fun sort of session lined up. I think we would love. Mikey's going to share some more kind of thoughts in a few minutes, but before we did that, we thought we might just do a kind of a rapid fire or a lightning round of some questions to Mikey that I think are questions that many of us have. So he's going to do some kind of quick yes no answers, and then we will ask him to maybe expand on some of those a little bit as well. So, Mikey, the first question in the lightning round is, does recycling actually work? Yes, no.
Yes, it definitely does. There are some caveats to that where I think brands, when you do give them an inch, they tend to take a mile about some of the claims they make. But the government did just come out and change, like you actually have to have a burden of proof with your claims. You can't just say it's recyclable. You have to kind of get into like why and how. So in short, yes. But there are things that can definitely go wrong along the way, and we're redesigning the system as we go to make it so those aren't as influential as they used to be.
Yeah, love it. So good, optimistic answer there that, recycling does actually work with some caveats. Basic question, is paper always better than plastic?
This is like a very tricky question. I always like to say it depends on the application. So a good example of this is, what's better, a plastic bottle or the paper cartons that you get for your milk, right? It's kind of a trick question because, as you might know, if you put milk over office paper, it would fall on your lap. That's not universal to office paper, that's any paper. There's a plastic lining inside those cartons to do the job. So even some applications, especially liquids, I would just stick to the plastic bottle versus the paper, simply because why are you mixing materials and increasing complexity that makes recycling difficult versus if you're doing something like an Amazon box, like corrugated boxes protect things really, really well. So if you aren't using a liquid product, usually paper is better. Obviously you have to look at the carbon footprint analysis and do the deep dive, but like I always like to say, especially when people say, oh, the LCA says plastic is better, always go to the section where they talk about health, human health and impacts on health, because that is often disregarded in most plastic LCAs because there's no way to quantify it because we don't understand the impact of plastic on the human body. So
And Mikey, maybe
always
just
look at the
explain,
details.
Mikey, just explain for people who don't know what an LCA is, just at least explain what the acronym stands for. Maybe we don't have time to get into how that works, but maybe just mention what an LCA is at least.
Life cycle assessment. So basically the accounting form of everything that went into the product. That's how I understand them. That's the easiest way to kind of explain it.
Beautiful. Next lightning round question. Is recycled and recyclable the same thing?
No, they are slightly different. So recyclable means in theory something is recyclable. That is getting questioned quite a lot now, the definition of recyclable, because theoretically speaking, I'll get something that's kind of tricky. I always keep a bag of trash next to my desk just for moments like this. So this is an LDPE or HDPE polyethylene, type 2 or type 4 plastic that you can bring to your soft plastics collection at your local supermarket. You can say this is recyclable because you can drop it off at your local supermarket. The issue you have with this is that when they put trackers, 53 trackers in soft plastic bins, you might have seen this ABC News article, 51 out of 53 of the trackers didn't even reach a recycling facility. So in theory, this is able to be recycled, but there's such a large infrastructural gap between it that it can't actually get recycled. And then you go something like an aluminum can, which most people, there's either bottle returns or can returns in this instance. You get 5 or 10 cents back in some states, or you can put it in your curbside recycling bin or your local transfer station, all the same. Now, those are the kind of the definitions of recyclable, two very different things, but there's now that burden of proof where you need to understand, like, can it actually get recycled? And when you might say on the side of a product, it says recycled and recyclable, what they're implying in that instance with recycled is that it's made with recycled content. So the aluminum in this can is made from recycled aluminum cans. It's not raw aluminum ore. And that's very important because when we talked about that like life cycle assessment or the impact, you save 95% of the energy by recycling the aluminum can and using recycled aluminum because you don't have to raise it to the same critical smelting temperature from original aluminum ore from recycled aluminum cans because it's already in the right form. So there are some instances where that recycled content makes a huge impact on the product.
Love it. And then the final lightning round question is plant-based plastic the solution to all of our problems?
In some instances, yes, but it devil's in the details. You know, if they're putting a bunch of nasty chemicals just to say, "Hey, it's made of sugarcane," then no, because the chemicals in plastic are just as much of a problem as the fossil fuels. what what's interesting is there are some companies, like if you're interested in sustainable and bioplastics, one that I think might actually be the answer is a company out of the Southeast United States called Utopia Plastics. They spell it with an X at the end. They use a derivative of, I don't know the actual plant because it's under their patent, but you could call it hemp. It's a distant relative of hemp. And from there, it's a natural polymer. And what that means is it naturally plasticizes without the use of a chemical. So much so that the farmers will use that plastic as silage cover and it will actually degrade during the growing season and feed the soil. So there are some natural plastics out there that are actually a genuine solution that naturally biodegrade, naturally compostable, and naturally don't have to incur those like toxic chemicals to plasticize. But there, for every one of those, there's probably six or seven that kind of have some devil in the details that you have to really read up and be careful on. So yes, they're an answer, but they're critically underfunded and not being adopted as fast as they should.
Well, I know we're going to dive a lot more into some of these things, and thank goodness we have you with us today. So I'm going to hand over to Mikey now. He's going to share a presentation for us, a kind of mini keynote, if you like, on the current state of recycling and where the world needs to go from here. And then we'll come back and we'll have some more dialogue and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A from the audience as well. So over to you, Mikey.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm just gonna get this up and running, and then can everybody see this all right?
Looks great, Mikey.
Perfect. So just to pick up where we left off, one thing I forgot to mention a little bit earlier is that I've studied and worked with over 24,000 municipalities on their recycling programs, and I've worked in packaging and solid waste for about 5 years now. What my specialty is and what I'm considered a subject matter expert on with recycling is how is something actually recyclable? And then when it is, what is the human behavior around that? Like, how are people going to perceive packaging and what is their thought process in thinking if it is or isn't recyclable and how to handle it? So, a little bit that I wanted to cover during this presentation, just I wanted to give a brief introduction to what my company does because it paints a lot of context into like some of the expertise that I have, and then also talk about what is actually sustainable in solid waste. I know this is a very motivated crew around sustainability, so you're probably much more clued in um, than some of my typical audience for this. But a lot of the definition of sustainability does get muddied quite a bit when it comes to solid waste simply because we're dealing with something that is a naturally unsustainable process by having an output like that. So with that, just what Scrap is we're basically on a mission to educate and empower a global community towards a circular future. And how we seek to do that is creating accessible technology for a variety of stakeholders so everybody can speak the same common language when they're talking about packaging. I know packagers out there love to be very technical with their description of packaging. You know, they'll talk about the orientation of the plastic, what polymer it's made of, what process it's gone through. To the average consumer, they would just say, "Oh, it's a bottle. Oh, it's a clamshell." So being able to take very complex information that is very much so needed and boil that down into a very simple result for the end stakeholder so they can understand what to do and also educate themselves so they don't always need to rely on our software to solve the problem for them. How we started is we made a free mobile app that anybody is allowed to download. You can scan the barcode on the back of the item and it tells you how to recycle the item based on your local infrastructure. Um, and we went through a lot of iterations with that, and starting a business, you can't make much money off of a free mobile app. So the app still works today, it still runs. It's actually like our gift, so to speak, that anybody can use. There's no catch, no account required. You can just use the app. We then pivoted the company to help solid waste programs digitize, and then also companies that are trying to reach zero waste, and universities as well, be able to do so and track and measure so they can be compliant with ASHE standards, zero waste standards. Out in the UK, we do a lot of work out there. It's actually government law that you have to track your waste if you produce more than $2 million in annual turnover, or produce more than 25 tons of plastic. So a lot of people fall under that umbrella. So we created a web dashboard as well as iPad kiosks that sit by bins to educate people, and then also track all the data analytics around the solid waste bin, and then also what's coming in through procurement, so you understand what your overall waste profile looks like. Basically, we're QuickBooks, but for waste. That's kind of the best way to kind of look at what we do. We also do a lot of work with packaging companies. So as they're designing new packaging, they can come to us and ask, if I design it and build it in this way, will it still be recyclable? And we can turn around and analyze the packaging, and before it even hits the shelf, we can tell them if it's a good idea to push it out there, or maybe change a few things around the design to make sure it is in compliance and can be recycled accordingly. So that is enough about me, and now on to my favorite stuff with sustainability. So, by definition, a sustainable system is a system that meets the needs of the current generation with minimal external intervention without compromising the needs of future generations. As Fiona was mentioning earlier, waste is kind of a glitch that is uniquely human. Um, by default, the solid waste system is not sustainable. It's in some instances it's been accepted as a necessary evil. A good example, not necessarily that it's bad, but one example I like to point to is aseptic containers. So like your almond milk carton, the flat top ones that are multi-layer, and when you twist the cap, it actually breaks the seal. Those are very, very difficult to recycle, and are some avenues to do so. But the trade-off with that is you can increase product shelf life by 9 to 16 months in some instances. So you're minimizing food waste quite dramatically, but you're increasing your packaging waste. There are some instances where Tetra Paks and those cartons are fantastic, and they should be used, but there are some instances where it can cause problems based on where it's distributed. So with waste, it's been very much so looked at from the end, where you shouldn't be dealing with waste when it's waste. You should be dealing with what would be waste further up the chain and designing it out of the life cycle and journey of the product. So what is sustainable for packaging? And the reason I want to talk a lot about packaging is because this will translate back to your home and to your workplace, where you'll really understand what might be good decisions to buy on the shelf, or what to really do with the item once it's done. Um, so the biggest key factors for what's sustainable for packaging is every life cycle assessment and every expert in the field agrees that if the packaging fails to protect the product or extend the shelf life, it is by default less sustainable than any format that might be compostable, biodegradable, recyclable. If it fails in its job, it will do significantly more damage. A good example of this is if your egg carton fails and your eggs break. Well, now there's 12 eggs that can't be eaten, but you might have saved X amount of CO2 by using a more sustainable carton, but because you made that trade off, your product is now on the floor. So ultimately, the packaging has to do its job. Packaging also doubles as retail space when you think about it. Packaging is also meant to jump out on the shelf. I could take the name off of a Pringles tube or a canister, and I could hand it to you, and everybody would instinctively go and reach for a potato chip. Packaging is kind of part of the experience of a product, which is why a lot of brands are very reluctant to change how they feel about packaging. Um, as I mentioned in point one, it's something that ships safely, efficiently, and on time. Um, but what truly makes packaging sustainable is it has to have a useful end market. When we think about waste, it works on a commodities market, but instead of trading gold and silver, you're trading corrugated cardboard and aluminum cans. if nobody is buying it after you're done with it, no matter what you do, unless you're taking a loss, you can't recycle it because there's no economic incentive to do so. There are policies out there like extended producer responsibility, which will allow for people to have like a fee placed on packaging so that we can fund recovery efforts, like for complicated things like cartons. Or for rural communities that they don't generate enough volume to have a recycling program, we can support that because waste has never been an infrastructure that's been shared by everybody. It's been something that's been paid for and opted into where appropriate. That is slowly starting to change. And also, the one I'll just touch on this packaging is really cool because it tells a story. It's a great spot not only to ship the product, but also interface between the brand and the customer to convey a message. Certain colors palettes make you feel a certain way. Like, when something's like a light green and it's got like leaves on it, you automatically jump to sustainable. Some brands do that in bad faith and it's greenwashing. Other brands do that correctly and it conveys that message appropriately. Um, and again, it's a lot of packaging does boil down to a marketing exercise once the key logistics are met. It's a relationship, not just procedure. And now to waste. I think waste tells a story, and I like to say it unites us all because everybody throws something away. If you don't, I applaud you. I work with trash every day of my life. I can't even get to no waste. I can get low, but I can never get to no. And it's something that all of us share common ground on that with the way society is structured, we all have waste and it all tells a certain story about what our purchasing habits are or, what might be necessary to us or just, Christmas. The waste stream looks entirely different than it does on just a typical, summer day because there's wrapping paper and there's gift boxes and all of these different things. So, in this exercise, I go over two different states, two different cities and communities, and how their recycling infrastructure and their recycling participation is different. So with this, I break it down by socioeconomic background because socioeconomics influence solid waste behavior dramatically. There's a super strong correlation between average household income as well as um, population and how that solid waste infrastructure operates. So here is Philadelphia's socioeconomic breakdown. You'll note the average household income is $49,000, the population is 1.6 million, and the average crime rate is 26.55 with a contamination rate of 23%. So when I say contamination rate, that is wrong items in the recycling bin where you're only supposed to have 5% contamination. If it's too contaminated, the recycling bin gets thrown out and put in the trash. So I know people will see recycling bins put in the trash. That happens when there are too many wrong items in the bin and it's not economically feasible to sort the contamination out to get the high value items. And they have a recycle rate of 8%, which means only 8% of things end up getting recycled. So which is very, very low. Now, I'm going to compare that to my hometown of Burlington, Massachusetts. They have a population much smaller than Philly of 26,000. They have an average household income of 154,000. The average crime rate is about half that of Philly, and the contamination rate is around the same at 20%, but our recycle rate is much higher at 37%. And I think the socioeconomic breakdown is in the bottom left as well. And the reason I brought up the socioeconomic breakdown is I have a very good friend from Philly. He goes by your fave trash man on Instagram. He and I had a very detailed conversation about what different motivators are in recycling. And he told me the people in Philly recycle is because clean neighborhoods will reduce crime by 40%. That is not to say that Philadelphia has a crime problem, but what motivates a community is if you can do something to keep your community safe and make drug dealers uncomfortable, in his exact words, people will respond to it and do it. Versus, I'll get into it on the next slide with Burlington, people recycle because they want to feel good about their consumption habits and keep things nice and tidy purely for visual and aesthetic reasons. When you're looking at a community with a lower income threshold and then also one of a much higher population, The planet is secondary to the world. You're in the city. It's big. It's the concrete jungle. It's hustling and bustling. So this idea is that like, oh, we have to stop climate change. That message doesn't resonate well with a population like that. They're very community driven and community centric. So when you relate the solid waste issues back to the outcomes in their own community, they latch onto it much more, and you can actually drive positive change. The biggest barriers for Philly is that programs aren't as convenient or clean. And what I mean by that is it's not curbside where you they get picked up every week. They might have to bring it to a trash site, or it might be they just have to bring their bags to the curb. I know Boston doesn't even have curbside toters all the time. You just put your trash on the curb, clear bags for recycling, black bags for trash. Not all recycling programs are created equal, nor are they as convenient to participate in. There are also language and cultural barriers with recycling. Half of our company works in the UK. We got into an argument about when they kept saying packets. I was like, "What do you mean, like a packet of sugar, like to put in your coffee at a diner? Like, why is that important?" Their packets are like a chip bag. They call a packet of crisps. So there are just certain language and terminology barriers when you're educating people about solid waste that like the vernacular and the slang is just fundamentally different. Um, and also, this is a big topic in solid waste is there's an anti-establishment sentiment overall, and this is common in both Burlington and Philadelphia, where people feel that packaging waste and solid waste is not their problem because they didn't have a choice in the matter of how the goods they purchased came packaged. So just to touch on the next slide a little bit, in Burlington, like I said, it's a feel good exercise. It's already convenient to recycle, and sometimes it's too convenient. And certain items are banned from landfill in Massachusetts, so they have to recycle. So it's not voluntold. They're pretty much voluntold you have to recycle because these cannot go to the landfill, and if they do, you're fined. Um, the barriers that Burlington faces is that there's a lot of entrenched behavior in recycling. Um, with an older population, you deal with people that said this is the way we've always done things and we won't change. So when you change recycling rules or you try to improve due to contamination, it's very difficult to get that uptake. And this is true in workplaces as well. So like, when you have people that have been at the company for 20 years, they believe that things are done a certain way and they're reluctant to change to improve practices. Um, Deviating from that routine participation gets very, very tricky. And there's a lack of the faith in the system overall in Burlington, very similar to Philadelphia, due to environmental justice issues, where there's a PFAS problem in Burlington, where our reservoir was contaminated by PFAS, which is common in flame retardants, so fire extinguishers, nonstick grease pans. It also was used to be used in some paper packaging to make it grease resistant. Um, so when you have issues that are somewhat associated with recycling, you get people believing that recycling is a scam or a sham, so they don't want to participate in the program. Here's the common ground. People want transparency. They want to understand packaging story and then also where is waste ending up? Not just packaging waste, but like where does my mattress go? Where does, my laundry machine go after it breaks and it gets taken off? Um, they want something convenience. They want a good, user experience when it comes to solid waste and packaging. Um, Also, philanthropy and altruism. We surveyed over 1,000 people and we said we'll either pay you to recycle or we'll donate money to charity on your behalf. 96% of people said just donate the money to charity. I don't recycle to get paid, I recycle to feel good. So there's an actual inverse relationship when you pay people for good deeds. They did a study on donating blood. People donated less when they were getting paid to, $5 or got a t-shirt to donate blood than if they were just asked to donate blood. Because when you take away that good feeling from somebody by making it a transaction, it shifts the behavior and they use the other side of their brain, which is very analytical. This is often used even in entrepreneurial pitches. You don't bring up numbers or analytics until further in your presentation because you want people to be emotionally attached to your idea, the impact that it may have. This rings very true in altruistic behaviors like donating blood and recycling. And ultimately, they want clarity. Um, Packaging is very convoluted in its labeling. Sometimes it's getting a lot better. Think nutritional labeling. That's really the next step for packaging, so people can get an education and understand what can and can't be recycled. Um, Here's a couple of examples. You notice like the Amazon mailers, the ones that don't have the bubble wrap in them, it's just purely made of paper. They say, look, just recycle this bag like it's any other box, like cardboard box. That's because everybody understands how to recycle a corrugated cardboard box in most instances. So it's a great way through analogous messaging to just get people to understand. And another great example is glass bottle closed loop and reuse programs. This is a very interesting one because smashing glass, no matter the culture or place in the world that you're from, that noise will get everybody to turn around. You might notice in cinema that whenever they're trying to portray like a dodgy area in town, you might hear a glass shatter and then a cat hiss and like jump out. That's universal language. Nobody likes to hear glass smash, so it's humans natural inclination to reuse glass packaging. So there are just certain things that are very intuitive, and it's up to system design to have clear endpoints so it's an intuitive path for people to go from empty glass bottle to full glass bottle of product in the same fashion that they would if they were just typically food shopping. Now, this is how I like to kind of end my presentation. So I don't know if anybody here is from a state with a bottle deposit, but when they were first passed in 1971, they were about 5 cents. It was so that was equivalent to I think it was like 49 cents for a gallon of milk, and it was about $1.65 for popcorn. So at that point, you redeem 10 cans, you got your family's gallon of milk for the next few days. Jump to 2023, it is still 5 cents or even 10 cents in like Oregon and California. But now movie theater popcorn averages about $10.53, and a gallon of milk is $4.31. And 1971 was actually a big year for milk because that was the first time it passed 50 cents ever, and people were outraged at the time. So when we talk about these economic motivators, unless it's going to become something that is feasibly worth somebody's time, they won't engage in it because they'll just look at it. A nickel is not worth my time. Uh, I don't know how much a nickel really even goes for these days, especially with the cost of a gallon of milk being $4.31. So even if it grew with inflation, it would be about 38 cents today per bottle deposit on a can, a bottle, and some HDPE jugs as well. So we really have to rethink a lot of the policy going on in the space as to what's actually going to motivate people and get that turnout. And also, what's interesting in 1971, there was usually a breadwinner and somebody would stay at home. Now, most households are dual income. So there's not that one person whose job it is to maintain the house. It's a shared responsibility. And usually, what will happen is that these bottles, deposits, and cans are kicked to the wayside to either donated to like your Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts troop. They'll redeem all the cans because kid labor is free. And in some instances, which I don't necessarily agree with the ethical nature of this, some of the policies are designed to mind that homeless people will go around and collect the cans and redeem the deposit. And that completely changes the infrastructure of how bottle deposits and stuff are handled. So bottle deposits, I like to just summarize it by saying more money, more problems. That's what really happens with recycling, especially when you involve consumer behavior. And with that, that's about it for me. I think I'm right on time. So thank you for listening, everybody. I'm happy to go into questions. I'm aware that was a lot of information, especially if you don't come from a solid waste background. But I'm also happy just to answer general questions about how to organize a solid waste program around your office or your home and what are the best practices around that as well. This was kind of the senior level capstone class of packaging. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, like that, fascinating. What a great way to begin. And I think, I've seen this presentation before, but every time it really strikes me afresh with just, the complexity and some of the really the insanity, right, in our system. I've got some questions that I want to pose to you, but we've already got some questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to start with audience questions. And the first one is just, where do I start with recycling? I think that's a great question to begin with.
I like to always start with if you're going to start a recycling program and you want it to be effective, just go from high value items to low. I know a lot of southern schools will reach out to us asking us to help them start a recycling program because when you need to get permitting, like this is a civil engineering feat as well, because solid waste programs suffer from something called NIMBY, not in my backyard. So you need to focus on the really high value items like corrugated cardboard, mixed paper, aluminum cans, and plastic bottles. If you can get that correct, then from there it's easy to build a program. Don't immediately think we're going to jump to single stream, we're going to collect everything, we're going to divert everything. Start with what you know you can handle and just build out from there. It's easy to add a material or two. It's very difficult to start recycling with everything all at once. And the nice thing about single stream is it is able to handle some sense of contamination. 5% is the marker, but realistically they can handle up to 10. They just, they don't want to move the needle and then get 20 or 30. So as an individual, just think, what are the high value things that I can recycle? When in doubt, just throw it out. You'd rather not contaminate than contaminate. So just recycle the things you know you can. And then as you get more educated, you check out the town flyer, you check out your town's website, kind of build your knowledge from there. Nobody walks out freshman year with a master's in engineering that is years in the making. Solid waste is sadly just as complicated. I wish it was a lot easier, but we kind of take that for granted.
Yeah, that's great. Mikey, there's a sort of follow-on question, sort of kind of goes into a little bit more detail, and it says, can I as an individual really make a difference if I reduce my own waste at home? And if so, how do we best communicate that so others will also participate? Especially with statistics about plastic recycling being less than 10%, I find many people don't think they can make a difference. Isn't getting large companies to change their packaging the first step that needs to happen before real change can take place?
Yes, so that's a very full question. So yes, as an individual, you can make a difference because what we don't realize is that when one person doesn't do the job, and this isn't a small remote way to pin it on the question asker, but when one person doesn't do the job, you give justification for the person next to you to say, well, they're not doing it, so I'm not going to do it. Versus if everybody just says, you know what, we're going to try and do this, and someone's in the minority, and this is where I like to talk about that altruistic benefit. Some towns don't paint a good picture about where the revenue from the solid waste program goes. I guarantee you, if they said, look, for every dollar the solid waste program saves, we'll donate 10 cents to the local school for new playground equipment, you will have a screaming child yelling at you, wondering why they don't have new playground equipment because we're all supposed to recycle correctly. It's it, individual action absolutely matters. And I notice later in your question, you talk about large companies. If large companies notice individuals not doing the part, and there's actually a report that just came out that was sponsored by a lot of large companies saying consumers aren't doing their part, so why should we do ours? Everybody's just going to be eternally pointing the finger. So if you're doing everything perfect, and then the company tries to say, well, this is too difficult, and plus people aren't going to do it right, and we have evidence to show that individuals can do the right thing, they don't have a leg to fall back on. And so part of talking about, later in your question, you talk about changing packaging to be better. That's something called extended producer responsibility. It's EPR for short. What that basically means is that that 5 cent deposit that is on the can right now in certain states, that is paid for when you buy it at checkout. So what that fundamentally changes is that now that deposit is going to be paid for by, this is Polar Seltzer. So Polar will pay for the 5 cent deposit, and it goes into basically a fund that is run by the state. If you return this can, you get 5 cents out of that fund. Whatever cans are now not returned, that leftover money then has to be funded to expand recycling programs till we hit that 100%. So now there's basically a packaging tax on everything, and that tax amount is calculated based on the impact of the packaging itself. So there's automatically now a financial incentive to switch to better formats of packaging based on your product specifications so that you can pay a lower EPR tax. And for those that need the, like, good example is an electronics company that's a tablet might use styrofoam, which is terrible in terms of really good at protecting the product, really bad for the environment and hard to recycle. If they're like, look, I'll pay the 50 cents so my product doesn't break, which from a life cycle perspective is a very good decision because the electronics is far more important to protect than, say, a piece of cardboard. So they'll pay the extra to say, look, we know we're putting strain on the system, so we'll pay that extra. So I think, and then the last thing I want to touch on is the plastic recycling rate. That is very true. But what I will say is that figure is based off of that is figure is a bit misleading, not in that it's not correct, but that accounts for all plastic, including like the plastic off your car and the plastic on your keyboard, not just like bottles. So bottles have a recycle rate of about 22 to 28% depending on the state. What then kind of you can zoom out even more in that what we're talking about, consumers only make up 8% of the recycled material stream. 92% comes from post-industrial, and that is almost recovered at like an 85 to 90% level. So it's really just the tail ends of the packaging chain. Recycling works very well on industrial scale because you have all of the commodities in one spot. When the commodities aren't in one spot, you got a penny here, a nickel here. You got to go up and pick out the change, and at that point, it's like this is too much. So with that plastic piece, it works very well from an industrial level. It's the consumer lens that we're really struggling to figure out because of just the complete variation of packaging these days. Because everybody thinks what is best for my product, what is not best after my product. And that's where EPR is going to come in and fix a lot of that issues. So I'm aware that was a very loaded answer. So I apologize if that was a lot, but
No, no problem. And I so I'm gathering from your answer that you are a believer in extended producer responsibility and similar laws that will.
yes, the one thing I do draw a little bit issue in is just like the sway that large corporations have in that. The biggest issue I have is that a producer responsibility organization is usually formed, and that is meant to regulate the producers, but that producer responsibility organization is allowed to be made up of Keurig Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola. So it has to then self-regulate, which that's my personal opinion. Professionally, if they get the job done, it's fine. It's just more I can see how that system could be exploited. They haven't done anything wrong yet, but it's just more of the thing of relying on big businesses to self-regulate has never worked in solid waste before. I don't see how that's going to work again, but now there's actual fiscal penalties in place. So
Yeah.
businesses does speak in dollars and cents, so that will probably make it work this time.
Mikey, there's a lot of great questions coming in, and some of them are, on the individual level. Question here from Emily Mello, and it's a question I think we all struggle with, even those of us that work in sustainability. Emily's question is there anywhere that I can recycle batteries? Just regular, non-rechargeable, AA, AAA batteries. I've only been able to find places that recycle rechargeable batteries.
Yes, so usually with those, definitely don't put them in the recycle bin, which I'm glad you didn't say, can I just throw them in my curbside bin? No, they catch on fire. Lithium, part of the sortation process involves water in some instances. And when lithium comes into contact with water, it's explosive. So you'll actually set facilities on fire. It's happened over 250 times in the past year. Like it's a very common problem. So usually any electronics store, like Batteries Plus, they will take your old batteries because batteries they're high of material value. They want the lithium. So Staples, I know will take them usually. Batteries Plus, where I'm actually in the middle right now of synthesizing the entire United States, both packaging and content guidance. So I'll be able to tell you, hopefully in April, every single drop off point for batteries, both car batteries, alkaline, rechargeable, where you can bring it in the United States, whether fees apply, what days they're open, whole nine. So give me 3 months and I'll have the real answer for that question. But for now, usually Staples or any hardware store or electronics store will accept batteries for recycling.
That's great. Thanks so much. So on a similar level, a question from Dr. Deborah Merrill Sands. Do plastic containers for food need to be clean to be successfully recycled?
It certainly helps. I know the most notorious one is like peanut butter jars. Like peanut butter and honey are the two like worst things to get out of a plastic jar. If it's bad, just throw it out. Like because you're gonna spend like 10 minutes trying to get everything out to an acceptable level. But I like to just say like give it a quick rinse and just get the heavy residue off. A little bit's not a big deal. Same thing goes for pizza boxes, right? Pizza's not recyclable, but pizza boxes are. So even a little bit of grease is actually fine with the pulping process. It's more when you're slathered with like cheese and sauce, they don't want that in the system. So it's more just like make it tidy, but it doesn't need to be perfect. It is trash after all, or recyclable waste, whichever way you look at it. So
That's great. Question from Paul Barnes, Mikey. Do single stream recycling programs really work? If so, what is the percentage of material that is being recycled?
So that's actually come under a ton of scrutiny in the past month. So the ideology that we're going to sort things and then mingle them together and then get them sorted out again doesn't really make much sense from a logisticals perspective. The reason that single stream recycling was created was because it was very expensive to run hauling routes, to run trucks separate every day, to pick up one day get glass, one day to get plastic. So single stream recycling was a way that hauling companies could become financially effective and more profitable. The issue with that was at the time we were sending our waste to China and they were just like, hey, we pay people $1 an hour anyway, so we can just take it, we'll sort it out ourselves. And in 2018 they said, no, we're good. So then we basically kept leapfrogging to different developing nations for them to take the waste, and that's why you see, Indonesia has a huge solid waste problem. That's not their waste; that's every other country's waste getting dumped on them. So now what single stream recycling is looking at in the past, this recently as of this last month, is they looked at the efficacy of single stream programs. There were two organizations, Ball, like the people that make any aluminum can or the mason jars, and then another organization that is sponsored by a lot of large corporations, which is the Recycling Partnership. They're an NGO. What they looked at was that most single stream recycling programs are not as effective as they should be, and the biggest gaps are education, participation, and contamination. So with that, they're only about 20% effective of what they can be right now. So it's not a farce. It's a new system. It's not getting dumped in a landfill. It's just by the time it's getting sorted at the plant and everything, and we're getting this divergence of opinion where Ball wants these cans back because it saves them money. They're willing to put deposits on it and completely remove aluminum and PET plastic bottles from the waste stream and have them be deposited at stores where they're just shredded and done. So single stream recycling does work. It just, when they're picking the, like at the material recycling facility, picking out the items, they pick high value to low value. So they get the cardboard, then they get the cans, and they get the bottles. So there are items that are low value that if the plant's not busy, they'll run it through again and pick more items out. But they're not getting every single item. And what happens at the tail end with whatever's left over, they call that residuals. So single stream recycling very much does work, just not as much as desired. And with the genesis of kind of AI in the space, it's getting significantly better, like very, very fast. Like humans aren't on the line anymore picking out items. It's robots doing it at like 160 picks per minute. So it's getting better, but it's not a perfect system.
Mikey, there's a related question here from Sydney Rollins, who says, what can be done when a recycling company refuses to contract with your institution anymore due to past contamination? And there's a statement here, which I assume is true. UNH's Manchester campus doesn't collect plastic or aluminum for recycling because the company won't work with us anymore.
Yeah, so college campuses are kind of in the bracket of their own for how difficult it is to establish a recycling program. There's three reasons. One, you have a population that churns very quickly, so legacy knowledge and legacy behavior is not passed down. Two, your entire population emigrates in and out. So people come from different recycling backgrounds. I grew up on single stream curbside. When I lived at the Mills or Divine, I had a dumpster I had to walk stuff out to. In some instances, like you're not supposed to put your recyclables in a plastic bag, but if somebody's carrying it down from the dorm, it might be convenient to do so. And that's not intuitive to a lot of people because you're from the city of Boston, it's supposed to be in a bag. So there are things like that that make it very difficult. And the third one, which is the most perplexing, is you have a population of students that is significantly intoxicated for most periods of the week. So that dramatically impacts behaviors around recycling. And so the ways around that is, at least if you don't collect plastic or aluminum for recycling anymore, the best way around that is a deposit return scheme or like an amnesty zone for people to drop off the containers where the machine will not accept an item that is not a bottle or a can, so there's no risk of contamination, and the material comes out shredded and ready to sell, so it's high value. So that's where you have to get very creative with recycling behavior and infrastructure to match the demands of the university. So that's a very common issue where due to contamination, sometimes they just shelf the program because it's not economically viable anymore. And that's why they don't do cardboard, because cardboard, it's hard to mess that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Mikey, there's a couple of questions in here. One from Peter Neville says this presentation needs to be shared in public schools, Rotary meetings, municipal trainings of DPW workers. Fantastic presentation. How can I share this? And Clark Corson also asks the same question. How do listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go on the website www.scrapprecycling.com, and it's scrap with two P's. There is a form on there just to like it sends me an email. My email is Mikey Mikey at scrap SCRAPP recycling.com. Just shoot me an email. I'm happy to share the presentation. We have a schools program, so we set up in schools. We're actually this April, if people want to get involved with the software, we're doing a free early access for 60 days. So people can sign up and we give you the software completely free. All we ask is for feedback. Basically, we've built a whole new accounting platform so you can input what you're ordering from procurement. And you can also get matching educational materials and data analytics to track the program. So you can see what's viable for you as a recycling program and then also what your waste footprint looks like before it becomes waste, because waste doesn't originate at the bin. It's not that it all of a sudden becomes waste. It started when they packaged it at the factory. So why are we only addressing it when it's at the bin, not prior? And that's what we're trying to shift around the attitude of waste. So I'm happy to share the presentation. I'm happy to give it again. I love teaching students. It's kind of I wanted to be a teacher at one point, but I got roped into trash instead. My sister is actually a missile scientist for Raytheon, and I play with trash every day. So I'd love to talk about it. So yeah, just send me an email. I'm happy to set up a time.
That's awesome. I think we've probably got time for one last question, Mikey. I'm going to sort of add two questions into one. So there's a question from Briella, your pal from
Yeah.
Sustainability Fellowship cohort,
Hello, Brianna.
now working for wonderful company Tons of Maine. She'd love to know more about e-waste in particular, and how how what are some actions that businesses, consumers, and stakeholders can do in order to divert e-waste.
Mhm.
And then there's a very specific question from Diana who asks about, when the peanut butter or that honey jar goes in the dishwasher before it goes in the recycling, is it okay that the plastic gets distorted a little bit in the dishwasher from the high
I
temps?
can answer the easy one first. Plastic is perfectly fine to be a little bit distorted. It's gonna get shredded, so like it's gonna be fine for what it has up for it next. So yes, that's actually like putting it through the dishwasher is like a really good thing to do. I That's actually genius. Never thought of that. I just save my glass jars and then use them because I'll can up food later in the season. So plastic jars, never thought to do that. That's a really good idea. So Briella, e-waste. So e-waste is like gold, to be quite honest with you. The best way to do it is honestly to kind of look around and see like how much electronics waste is being generated around like the office and whatnot. And then we can help with e-waste and stuff too at Scrap. But basically what you're going to want to do is, if you have space down in the warehouse or like a commercial spot, just get, it's called a Gaylord. It's a cardboard bin on a pallet. Just fill one of them up, and if you just call a local electronics company and say, "Hey, I got a bunch of office computers. I got computers, hard drives, old circuit cards, batteries. How do you want them presentable?" And they'll sometimes, if you have enough high value material, they'll just pick it up for free. We had a medical company call us, and we have to help them set up a recycling program. The company wanted to take the waste off of them for free, but the woman was smart enough. They're a medical manufacturing company, and platinum is very commonly used in medical manufacturing. Platinum trades like 1,000 and like $2,000 a kilogram, and this woman had her desk stuffed with platinum, and they wanted to do it for free. So she knew she platinum was valuable, but basically your e-waste has gold in it, it has silver, it has a lot of precious metals. So a lot of times e-waste programs are probably the cheapest programs to do. They just require more internal motivation and internal planning to get it done. But
That's
e-waste
great.
programs are probably the best way to start because the impact is just so much greater because electronic waste generates a lot of emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mikey, we are, this is obviously a big challenge from a sustainability perspective. There's still a lot of work to be done, both here at UNH and around the world. But I think we all have a lot of optimism in the future because there are entrepreneurs and people like you who are really digging in and really figuring out how we can move forward in a sort of smart systems-oriented solution way. So thank you for sharing this. Thanks for all that you're doing. We'll put Mike's contact info in the chat before we end. But thank you for being here. Thanks for all you're doing in the world. We so appreciate it and admire it.
Thank you so much for having me. And to anybody in the audience, no, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy, Fiona, if there's like a way to send everybody an email, I'm happy to send out the
Yeah.
presentation as well too, if people
We
want a
can,
copy.
yeah, absolutely. We do send out an email after the webinar, so we will include that. Thank you so much, Mikey. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to my wonderful colleague, Alexis Dwyer. She's our Alumni and Network Stewardship Coordinator, and she'll just close us out today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mikey. Thank you, Fiona. So we're so grateful that you all were able to attend today. I'm Alexis Dwyer, the Program and Network Stewardship Coordinator here at the UNH Sustainability Institute. And we hope that you'll join us for our next session in the alumni webinar series on March 26th, where the topic will be hidden toxics in our products in the transition to the green economy. So with an incredible help of this panel that you can see here on the slide, UNH alumni working in different parts of the field, we'll discuss what this means for you personally and professionally. And we hope you register. And I'll be sending out the registration link to everyone who registered for today as well. And as always, we would love it to keep connected with you. So you can see some different ways I've listed here on the slide to get involved. If anything piques your interest, such as hosting a UNH Sustainability Fellow, which Mikey was, or working on a high, or working with our sustainability dual major students on a high-level capstone project, or maybe you have an interest in coming back here to campus to speak with students to share your experience, we would absolutely love to engage with you. So please reach out to me. And as mentioned, we hope to see you in March. Thank you all so much for attending today and being a part of this excellent discussion.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Thanks again, Mikey.